GRU. I took a class last semester with Dr. Ron Walker. I was in the social studies class, and we had to give a 30-minute presentation. And with that presentation, mine was on critical reading and thinking skills. And he said, Victoria, I like your presentation. This was after the semester. He emailed me, and he said, can you do a presentation for my workshop? And I thought, wow, me, really? He was like, yes, you. And I said, I don't know about that, you know. And then I thought about it. I was like, well, I guess. He said, yeah, you did really well. He said, like your presentation, so would you be able to do it? I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So that's why I'm here before you today to do that presentation on critical reading and thinking. My two concentrations are social studies and language arts. At first, I was more in love for language arts, but then I've grown to love social studies more now, so social studies. So that's where kind of my heart is now, because I just feel like you can do a lot with social studies. How many teachers do we have here in the house? Okay, more teachers than students. How many students do we have here? Okay, and I don't vote. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so the primary sources, basically we're kind of talking more about the Library of Congress and how to place those primary sources into your lessons. All right, so with primary sources, why do you want to use them? Because they're raw materials of history. And I actually like the way the last presenter did hers, like that was really raw and just hands-on, just bringing the corn literally in here. That was definitely just primary all day long. And then another reason you want to use primary sources are because they're original documents and objects which were created at the time of understudy. So it was created at that particular time, during that particular time period. And they're different from secondary sources and their first-hand experience. Okay, so another reason is a good reason to use primary sources because students have a practical sense of history and the complexity of the past. So if you show them a picture of that primary source, they're kind of like, wow, that happened. Like I know last class, I was in a social studies class, and she showed them a picture, primary source, of some indentured servants. And then she showed them pictures of, I think it was in Europe. And it was Tsar Nicholas. And she showed how Tsar Nicholas, how he treated the peasants. And when she showed the peasants and how malnourished they were, and she showed it to the students, they were like, whoa! You know, and then first she asked them if Tsar Nicholas was a nice guy. Before she presented the material to them, she said, Tsar Nicholas, does he look like he's a nice guy? And some people said yes, and she said, does he look like he's a mean guy? Some people said, he look like he can be a little mean. And she said, well, you know, Tsar Nicholas, he had some peasants fight in the war for him. They were fighting for him. So since they're fighting for him, do you think that he's a good guy? And it's like, yeah, because, you know, they're fighting for him, so they must like him, so he seems like a good guy. And then she shows this picture to the students of the peasants and how malnourished they are and how Tsar Nicholas is not taking care of them and how he's not giving them any food. And they were just like, we hate you. When at the end of the lesson, they were like, we hate you, Tsar Nicholas. And I just thought that was funny, but it just showed how complex it was when she showed that picture of them, just how malnourished that they were, and the kids, and it was just like, they were like, whoa. So it's just complexity of that past. But it also helps students analyze primary sources, which can also guide them toward higher order thinking and better critical thinking and analysis skills. And we can't emphasize critical thinking enough. One thing that I like about using the Library of Congress, to me, is that you can gain access to audio recordings of history. I heard the Lincoln's Gettysburg Address on there, and honestly, I didn't really know that his voice sounded like that. I was like, oh, that's how he sounded. It was really long. He said it really slow, but that was him speaking. And then there's slave narratives on there. I thought that was interesting too, that I heard. And then just voices of different presidents and other music, anything. All right, so there are instructions, and I got this directly from the Library of Congress is to choose at least 2 or 3 primary sources that support the learning objectives and are accessible to students. Then you want to consider how students can compare these items to other primary and secondary sources, and identify an analysis tool or guiding questions that students will use to analyze those primary sources. Okay. All right, so 2 pictures I have here are of Emmett Till, these 2 pictures, and they're directly from the Library of Congress. And so, questions that you want to ask when you see these 2 pictures, how do you provide real-world connections? Like, why do you think somebody would put Emmett Till and compare that to Trayvon Martin? And a lot of students associate with Trayvon Martin, like when I was creating this PowerPoint, my son, he really didn't know that I was putting a PowerPoint together, but as soon as he saw this, he was like, wow, I would like to learn about that someday. I was like, oh, this picture was just up. I'm like, okay. It's like you kind of, like everybody just knows about Trayvon Martin. I don't think that a lot of people knew who Emmett Till was until something happened with Trayvon Martin. So this is a good way to bring history into that and incorporate civil rights and everything. All right. Are you done with the word walls? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do something called word walls, which is critical thinking. And you can use this with the students just to engage your thinking, also to engage some active learning. To engage some active learning, because we want them to kind of get up out there. Sometimes get out their seats. I know it's a little chaotic, not all the time, no. But sometimes have them get out, so that way it just won't seem like, oh, this is boring. So that's what we're going to practice today. So I'm just going to count some people off. So let's see. Okay. All right, we're going to give him a minute to put the word walls up. Okay, so has anyone ever heard of word walls or word gallery or 4 corners? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're doing. Excuse me.
Is that 2 right there?
Is this word number 2?
I think that's
Yeah,
2.
2 of them?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it is. Okay. All right, so we're going to do this like a word gallery, where you have the questions around the room, and then you just get up and go to each question. I'm going to hand you a marker. Does anybody know the story of Trayvon Martin? Everyone knows that story? Right, because all of the news. Okay, so does anyone know, why do you think they would compare these two young teens? Why do you think they would compare the 2? So we have words like that around the wall, asking those questions. That everyone rise on up. And write your answers. What's the 4th one?
4 total.
4. Oh, it is? Okay, good. Yes, just go to any one of them. It's a word gallery, so just visit any one of those. Thank you very much. Right on time. Right on time.
Right on time.
And that's the picture we're supposed to base.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Got 25 minutes.
I think the hardest part about doing something like this in the classroom for me is
The kids being all over.
the size of our classrooms. And you know, most of
Yeah, you
them
could
have
probably
30-something
split it up
kids.
into groups. Since it's a small group.
I would almost be willing to of course it is nice to have them up and moving around, but you know, they just have a sheet with those questions on it for each group to collaboratively work together and share their answers, you know?
Yeah,
When
I'd probably I'll probably split it up, like group 1, you over here, group 2 there, group 3.
But it
group 4,
definitely
you know.
helps to get them moving up and
And then we
around.
collaborate, because it would be a lot of kids just, you know, all
And you've
over.
always got those that are gonna come up and write something that has nothing to do.
But you don't always necessarily have to do it in the classroom though, like, you can take it and do it outside of the classroom so that you're not always in the classroom. I know as a student myself, thinking about me, I get tired of sitting in the seat for a whole long time. And sometimes we get tired, we get lectures and stuff, we want those breaks, kids do too.
Just make sure you let the office know or leave the room, because we've all gotten to shoot out about that. Like if a student has to leave early and they can't find your class. and you-
Really?
you just don't hear. Well, I mean, I can
You wanna
understand,
tell them
they
first.
wanna know where we're
Yeah,
at, so like,
most
until
of
you
these
can check out,
activities.
they know how to find us.
Oh, that's what
Okay.
it do not just do it. Like, I had a teacher who would take us outside, and he would say, you know, Miss, you know, her name was Miss Mantooth, from a school in a different state. But he was like, you know, Miss Mantooth, can I take the students outside, you know, to the gazebo? And she would say, yes, we walk outside to the gazebo, you know, write our journals or whatever. So long as you get permission, I think it's okay.
Right.
But you have to be willing to be that teacher that's going to advocate that.
And what I used to do was pass these around each group.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you can pass it.
Yeah.
You can pass it
Yeah.
around. Different ways you can implement.
Right, that'll work.
Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about this. And the way that we're going to talk about it, I'm going to interchange it up a little bit. We're going to do something, has anybody ever heard of like speed dating type thing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're doing a little speed learning. Okay. So I'm just going to count off 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It might not be even, but okay. Who's all the number ones? Can all the number ones raise up? Okay. All right. So I need for all the number ones to get with somebody who's a number 2. You guys get up and go around, or it might be sitting by him. She's a 2. She's number 1. You might do it. Might have a trio.
A trio?
No, she's,
But you want to mix it up. You don't want to be with somebody you already know.
you're 2.
I don't know anybody.
You're 2,
So you can
she's
either,
a
you
1.
can
Cool.
collaborate with them. All right, number 1 right now, you're just doing the talking. This is like a speed dating type thing. Number 2 is
I'm
just,
one.
number 2 is just listening. Number 1, you're going to talk about an answer that you wrote. You can choose either one of the 4. It doesn't matter which one first, but you're just going to choose about the answers that you wrote for each one. So this would be a form of like student learning, students learning from other students. All right, so number 1, what do you have before?
Being made contributive and training officer, I put the fear of not understanding, areas to understand. Like one was actually our time period, here are preschool, and people not want to be together.
There might be I didn't see bias because capture doesn't look like it's the same type of spirit or same type of thing. I just put prejudice. People just have prejudices that are unfounded. See, I didn't write all that, but that's what I meant by it.
So we're doing just one or you doing all?
Did you just get from 1? You wanna get to another one, or are you complete with your doctor's? Okay, you can go on to number 2, 3, or 4.
Okay, for that one, I put what Justice America, and, it doesn't matter if you kind of crash or not,
Focusing on them in a positive light. Smile. Yeah, exactly. Opposed to when I think the second happened, well, we want to show you how he really was. Right. So try to portray him as a negative.
All right, number 1, you have 2 more minutes.
So that people can see, and I can see why he did that. He wasn't such a good guy after the fact. So, family pictures one of the kids the way in which they died on national attention.
Okay. All right, so number 1, are you finished talking? Was number 2 talking also?
No, I wasn't. I need my time. I need my time.
Okay, number 2, you now have your time to discuss. You can either discuss topic 1, 2, 3, or 4. So you can discuss one or all of them. So now is your time to chat and socialize with your date, number 1.
Hey, I'm not judging.
How does the picture change your view? I put that the young men look similar in their pictures, like their age is similar, they look around about the same age. But it also made me think about their future and the changes. There are many changes that have come about within the laws between these 2 time periods, but then there's not a lot of changes as far as race and the stereotypes and the perceptions they go into. And it also made me think about their futures because they were both young, like what would they have become? Trayvon Martin didn't get a chance to go off to college or do something with his life. And the same with Emmett Till, we don't know what he would be doing if he was still alive. So that's kind of what those maybe represent. And I was thinking after I put this story, really we haven't made any of my roots. It's like now so much more in many ways we have to move I think that's just 60 years ago, 60 years later. So I don't think it's hard to inspire to the 2 different times. It's not sure it's pick and choose.
Very light skin on the picture, and when you think about black, and of course you're talking about different shades of color. When you look at the picture, that's on the screen there. So then you can take the race card situation.
How does this picture change your view of the situation of both sides? I put that it seems to just try to change your view. Each one didn't like history I'll torture somebody.
When I look at how does this picture change your view, it looks like there's a target population. time, my view would be that bad things happen to me. But when I look at my picture, then my view changes because it makes more marriage. I have a certain people, so that's how the picture changes.
And that's how she approaches. That's how she approaches everything.
What's the you guys at?
Riverside Middle. Evans.
Okay, number 2, did we get all of our chatterings out?
Yes.
Okay, was it a good date?
Yes.
Did someone find the one? Okay, all right, so one thing we did was we did student interaction. So I know one thing that they tell us to do as student teachers is they want us to always do like a group discussion, and then they want us to do a whole discussion. So does anybody want to know what everyone put or want to know everyone's thoughts? Because I know I heard some people saying, well, I didn't see what was on that paper, what everyone else said. So that would bring it home back to a whole discussion. All right, so let's go over here to question number 1. Why do you think Trayvon Martin and Till are being compared to each other? Okay, who put this one? They are both minorities in American society that receive national attention. You? Yeah. Okay. Would you care to elaborate? Does anybody agree with him?
Yes, so, yeah, they both receive national attention, because of the severity of the situation.
Okay. All right, the second one, somebody put their cause of death and also said national attention. Another person put similarity in age and justice to say of their deaths, age, young, and accused. Somebody put history repeats itself. Who put that?
I did.
Interesting. Okay, would you care to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I think that when you look at those two pictures and listening to, going back and reflecting on the summary that was given for Emmett Till, which I was not familiar with, then it sounds to me that even though we're on this journey of change, that we're in a situation where we're talking about the same thing from years ago that happened in a different location but has the same connotation.
Okay. So you feel like history's repeating itself?
Here we go again.
Okay. Does anybody agree with her? Yeah. Even though we have movements like the civil rights movements, and it seems like we've grown as a nation, does it still seem like history is repeating itself? So that's a question to think about. And then we have the events were similar to each other. Do you feel that these events were similar to each other? Because some people will argue, I've seen different blogs where someone said, no, they weren't similar because the person that killed Trayvon Martin, he was, I believe someone said Hispanic or something. So in their personal opinion, he was like, no, it's not similar. So some people are saying it's not, some people, yes?
Well, I mean, it's not, I guess you could look at it either way. You could ask why, how is what happened similar, and then how was each case handled similar. I see more similarities in how each case was handled, but not necessarily in the events themselves.
I think that if you look at it over here, I wrote that life experiences led to both of these. And I think that that makes them similar because both young men, where they were from, the attitude and the apparel or whatever. In the North, it's okay for black men to speak to a white child. You know, hey, how are you? And maybe in Florida, nobody thought anything in Trayvon's neighborhood about having on a hoodie on, you know, a big hoodie on, whereas he was out of place in the neighborhood that he was in. And so I think that makes them similar too, because the gentlemen were out of place and doing something that was normal and natural to them,
Okay.
but was not in the setting that they were in.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Let's go over to our this question. How do those two pictures, when they compare Trayvon and Emmett together, how do those change your view? All right, so who wrote the first answer? Young?
That was me.
Okay.
I put the young men look similar in their pictures. And what I meant by that is their age is really similar. Like, they look like they're around about the same age. And it kind of changed my view as far as about how changes have been made in history. A lot of changes have happened, but at the same time, throughout those changes, we're kind of still in the same place as far as our mindsets. Like, you can change laws and you can change how things operate, but you can't change people's opinions unless they're willing to change their own mindset. And then it also made me think about their futures. Like, we don't know what those two men would have become. We don't know what their future would have lied ahead of them. Would they have gone on a bad path? Would they have taken, a negative path and not done anything with their life? Or would they have been the next president or next lawyer or doctor? We just don't know.
Okay. All right, someone put their smiles are chilling. Tell me about that one.
Well, I mean, just the concept, they just look like happy young men, and we don't know their story. And so you stand up at the board and you tell us that they were mutilated.
I know Emmett Till looks really happy, doesn't he? With it beside his mother, and in that picture we had on, he looks like a very happy, bubbly, type of guy.
Child.
Yeah, and it seems like you just say hi to everyone. He looks very just bubbly. So that makes sense. The third one, it makes me see that every picture has a story behind it.
Well, that was me. Yeah, just because, had I seen that picture of him but didn't know anything about him, if somebody were to ask me, what can you tell about this person from this picture? I would have thought, oh, he was just a normal, happy kid going through life, but there's a story behind it that I didn't know.
Okay, and then someone put it shows that some things haven't changed even with our modern times. Okay, that's the same. So that's pretty much the same as that one. And then you can't actually tell what happened based on the photos, like you said. And then it helps to face reality. Who put that one? Okay, yes.
The reason I wrote that was it helps us to face reality. I meant that you can't judge the book by looking at the picture. You can see a picture, but we don't really know the true story, the true facts behind that story. And it just helps us to face reality that when we see a picture, we can't be too quick to judge what's going on in that picture.
Okay. All right, and then back here on this wall, do you think there is any bias for the photographer who took a picture of Emmett Till or Trayvon Martin? Okay, number one, no, I think one was in black and white because of the time, okay? And the other was in color. Okay, so many people put no. Somebody put yes. Okay, so my yes answers, okay, yes.
I thought it was a positive bias because in both pictures they were taken, you could tell they were taken by either friends or family. So, there were very positive pictures of the young men. So there was bias to me. It was on the positive side though.
Okay, I see another yes. Not with the photographer, but possibly with media out choosing to run these particular photos.
They chose to portray the young men as happy, innocent-looking children, who possibly, just depending on their slant, looking at it, who would do no wrong, weren't malicious. And so, to me, it would be easy to think that those children weren't in the wrong, were wronged by this these deaths.
I also put yes on there, and I, for that same reason, I just put innocence, because that seemed to be the image that they were trying to portray. Yes, in that picture.
I appreciate those photos because I know you all seen the one where they try to market Trayvon as being like a thug, where he throws the gang signs, but that would have changed the whole tone of how we would have viewed the situation, and that's when a lot of the ignorance comes out. You say, well, he was a thug, and, well, he had a hoodie on. But being a thug, wearing a hoodie, that doesn't deserve, you don't deserve to die because regardless. So, But I appreciate them showing those two pictures, just innocent little boys who didn't deserve to die.
Okay, so if you would have had it on the hoodie in that picture, would anybody feel like, how would you feel the photographer was being, if you would have had it on the hoodie and would have said, okay, Trayvon Martin, you know, he's been shot. Would anybody think like, oh, it's another dog who's just shot out, you know, doing something bad?
I just think it would be easier for ignorance to seep through and for you to say, you know, just another thug, one less thug we gotta worry about. But it just goes to show the power of the media. You know?
And that's where the power, I think that the photos were taken by, it seemed to me, I wasn't there, but it seemed to me that they were taken by family members, people who loved these young men, and were showing them in a way that was acceptable to them. You know, and your mom's not going to take a picture with, I don't know, a gang sign, but your mom's not going to take a picture with you like this and post it somewhere.
Right.
So I don't think the bias was intentional through the photographer. And what I'm understanding, that the bias to me would come through in the media. And if they had chosen to show Trayvon in a hoodie, then I see where there would be more differences.
Okay. All right, and then the last question, what factors do you think contributed to Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin's death? Okay, someone just flat out put race. Who put that?
Me.
Okay, you want to elaborate on that?
For me, it just appeared to be obvious that all that we really have are the pictures that you showed and a little bit of narrative and whatever you're bringing to the table. So when we look at both pictures, we just happen to be looking at two pictures of African Americans, and with, as we elaborated earlier, similar stories. And I mean, both boys are black. So it just looks like that's a huge factor.
Okay. Someone
that contributed to that.
Okay. All right, and then somebody put fear of the unknown.
That's me. Well, especially with Emmett Till, with him during that time period, it was during segregation, and people were, and still today, some people are still this way where they don't want to get to know someone of a different culture, whether it's Hispanic, African American, you know, from wherever. They're afraid of knowing about other cultures and getting to know other people. So, and then I also put ignorance as well, because that shows, you know, they just, I don't know, they have no, we should all be together. This is the United States of America. We're one.
You feel that way for both Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin?
Yes, both of them. Trayvon Martin is still the same thing. Things have changed, but things have not changed.
Okay. All right, and then some of these are the same. So someone put life experiences. Does that go back to what you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have racism, so race, stereotypes,
Then
prejudices.
is that lack of understanding.
Who wrote that one?
I did.
Okay.
I think it's just a lack of understanding with Emmett Till, you know, when we move to different places or we go to different places, you know, we sometimes bring with us what we know there, and it was his lack of understanding, perhaps in the end, that, you know, didn't protect him.
Okay.
And on the other side is also the lack of understanding of the people who killed him. And then you would say the same thing for.
I can understand that. Is everybody from the South here? Okay. Have you ever gone up north before and just went somewhere and somebody's not? Well, I never experienced it, but I know other people from the South are like, yeah, and you know, I looked at somebody and somebody's like, what you looking at? You know, when they went up north, or when you go up north, someone said that someone didn't hold the door open for them. It's like, oh, they must not have that Southern hospitality, so supposedly they're multicultural or whatever. Or we come, or if somebody from up north goes down south and like, why is everybody being happy and saying, hey, how you doing today? You know, so I understand what you're saying. Like he just maybe he didn't know that, you know, the South is like really racist. You know,
Not the
that that was a fault on his part.
Right, but it was
Whatsoever, it was just
misunderstanding.
lack of understanding.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I noticed differences even when young, because even though I spent 22 years of my adult life in California, I grew up here, and the choir tour, or the high school choir at the church I grew up at, First Baptist North Augusta, we used to do choir tours every summer. And we would go to churches up north. I mean, and even as teenagers, we were like, these people are rude. I mean, like, we figured that out the minute we left the South. And then I remember within a month after moving to California, I was right outside of Palm Springs. I think I was coming out of a bank, and I held the door open for an elderly lady behind me, and she was so shocked. She goes, "You must not be from around here." I go, "No." She goes, "Yes, South." I mean, that was before she even heard me talk or anything. You know, she just said that she had grown up in the desert. She was probably in her 70s, and she never had one young person hold the door open for her. And I'm like, well, that's just normal. I mean, this is what I do.
And yeah, so it's funny how it can change up. And you know, once you really get to know some people from the north, they actually make some really good friends. They're just not used to just publicly just, you know, I don't know you, so therefore.
I think it's a lot of population density.
Yeah.
In this area, I'm from the north, so you may only bump into maybe 20 people when you're walking down the street all day. But in the north, you see hundreds of people, so you can't speak to them all.
Right. How you doing?
So you probably don't, you know, so and if you do, they think something's wrong. So you refrain from even being toward them.
That's a good point. My mom is originally from New York, right outside of New York City. She was born and raised. She's been in the South longer, obviously, than she was in the North, but we have family still in the North. And she still refers to it as home, but we went back to New York for a wedding last October, and we went down into the city. It felt different to me. It's been a couple years since I had been, and my cousin is married to a former New York City fireman who was there at 9/11. He said it's 9/11. And in the city, there was some difference, you know, and it wasn't everywhere, but it felt different. And people were seemingly, from my perspective, much nicer than all the years in the past, you know, I've gone numerous times.
Okay. All right. So do you see how we did an engaging lesson? And this particular lesson, I know someone was like, how does this relate to anything? You can take this from, I know a lot of civil rights is within the 4th grade standard, and then also 8th grade, you can tie it back to Georgia history with Georgia civil rights as well. And this is just some other questions to get thought-provoking questions with critical thinking. So this is just a picture of an original picture that I got from my Library of Congress that says, "Thou shalt not whistle." They're saying that he whistled, that Trayvon Martin, but Emmett Till whistled at someone that was in the store. And so that's why I'm saying, "Thou shalt not whistle," because that's what they're saying here. And then they're saying it's a Mississippi commandment. So the questions that were asked were, who created this primary source? When was it created? Where does your eye go first? What feelings and thoughts does this primary source trigger in you? What questions does it raise? Okay. So just to sum it all up, critically thinking about critical thinking. All right. So what we did with critical thinking, we just got the ball rolling with questions. And I think that's important when you're doing any topic. I just got Trayvon Martin and Emmett Till was something that everybody kind of somewhat knew about, and we get the ball rolling with that. But even with some things that kids think are boring, we still can introduce that and open up questions for them and create critical thinking. And then go from there, you know, with your lesson, whether you have to do worksheets or whatever it may be. Now, this right here, critical thinking, what squared with my thinking, what made total sense to me, what pointed me in a new direction. Actually, just learned this from another conference. Has anyone ever heard of Dr. Drew Tomlin? Okay. I heard that from another conference. He's from the American Association of Leadership Education. Did I say that right? Okay, but AMLE. But he was at another education conference, and I thought this was really cool. So what I'm going to do, really quick, because I think we're running out of time, is I'm just going to have you write what squared with your thinking, what pointed you in the direction, and just leave your little stickies up here